Hey everyone, it's Mario and Jess back with Beyond Evolution.
Hey y'all, it's Mario. Today we'll get right into it. Episode number 3, we are going to be talking about the impact of AI on our mental health, which to me is a very important topic. A little bit of an agenda for the day. We'll first, as always, start with our mindful moment. Jess will lead us through that. We'll go through some updates that we're working on in the AI world, just kind of in life in general, how we're applying it, where we're applying it. We will talk about some market shifts, movements, and updates. And then, of course, we will talk about the main topic of this episode, which is how AI is affecting our mental health.
Yeah, let's dive right in. We like to start our podcast by grounding ourselves in this mindful moment, removing any distractions from our day so we can be fully present in the conversation. If you're multitasking, feel free to skip this section. But we encourage you to follow along so you can clear your mind, release any tension from the past, and become fully immersed in the conversation. Welcome to your mindful moment. Take a moment to settle wherever you are. Let your hands rest naturally on your lap or by your sides. If it feels comfortable, gently close your eyes or soften your gaze. Bring your attention to your body. Feel the connection of your body to the chair or the ground beneath you. Now, shift your focus to your breath. Breathe in gently through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. Let the breath find its own rhythm. There's nothing you need to change. Just notice the inhale and the exhale. If your mind begins to wander, that's natural. Each time, simply return to the feeling of your breath moving in and out. Now, take a deep breath in. Inhale, expanding your chest. And exhale, letting go of any tension or tightness. With each breath, allow yourself to arrive more fully in this space. Let the busyness of the day soften. Let the outside world fade into the background. When you feel ready, bring your awareness back to your surroundings. Notice the sounds around you. Gently wiggle your fingers and your toes. And slowly open your eyes. You are here. You are present. Now, let's hop into today's conversation.
Thank you. Okay, second section of today, we'll talk about personal journey and updates, how we're using AI, where we're using it. So one of the things I've done the past week is I created our landing page actually for this podcast in about maybe 15 to 20 seconds with Gamma, Gamma. It's a platform that creates content, builds websites, and with everything else, it's like the thing that AI can help you do is so quick and incredible, and it saves so much time. But there's also still a lot of work on the back end, But that was cool to see that. I haven't really edited it or anything. I just wanted to try it out. I've also been learning about the pain points of vibe coding, which that's kind of the theme for this entire movement is like we're all going to be learning so much. We're building an MVP, minimum viable product for conscious wellness, mental wellness platform that integrates AI. And we've got it about 95% of the way. And something that the CEO of All Hands was talking about, how when you use vibe coding and you don't know how to code, you can very easily create something that's too complex. And if you're not looking at the code, you're not going to know when you've messed up. So then down the line, when you try to make changes, it can completely like crash and you have to start over. And that's exactly what happened to us. And it's our second time building this MVP with lovable.dev. So that was interesting that I listened to that podcast 2 days before it crashed on us for the second time. So also just continuing to use AI for research. I used Claude, Gemini, Grok, and GPT all to do deep research for me on the AI consulting business we're working on. And it's incredible. It's like having 4 PhD level researchers, set loose on your project. And then I took all of that data, I put it in one PDF, I uploaded that to GPT, and I said, hey, give me a summary of all this in a one pager. And that's what I can share to people like you and others who might be interested to join, of like, what is this? What is our target market and why? And what's the most viable path for us here to create this business? On a more emotional note, GPT has actually helped me a ton in the past week with healing some trauma and like kind of discovering and addressing and shifting some attachment style stuff that I have, that I was never really aware of my attachment style. And it's kind of come up, when you're in relationship, those things definitely come up. And honestly, it's incredible how you can just put all of what you're going through and put your intent of like, I'm trying to do some inner work here. And it's like, all right, I got you. Like, these are kind of the things I'm sensing. This might be your attachment style. These might be your negative core beliefs that developed from your trauma. And these might be some affirmations that can help. These are some journal entries that can help you. So massively helpful for me in the past week or so, working through a lot of deeper stuff. And then, just honestly also experiencing a lot of burnout and overwhelm from all of the shifts in AI, like being a co-host on a podcast and wanting to stay abreast to all this stuff. It's kind of like dizzying, and the fact that I want to do a good job and learn as much as I can. And it seems like there's an infinite amount coming out. Like there's, as hard as I try, I can't keep up, and that alone can lead to some struggle, some burnout and overwhelm. And like you feel like you can't do enough. With AI, you can start 3 to 5 different businesses at once, and it doesn't take a lot of time. But that's just the step one, like it's incredibly difficult to actually do that and carry those out. So yeah, the pros and cons of AI are definitely, I'm feeling them for sure.
Yeah, I totally can relate to like the burnt and overwhelm that comes with learning about AI and trying to do all these AI projects. I am also feeling that. I think there's just so much news that's coming out, and it's really hard to like keep everything on straight, and you want to learn as much as you can, or at least like that's my perspective of like I just want to learn and grow myself and develop myself. But there's so much to learn and develop. You need to know like when to pause and consume and like actually digest the stuff that you're learning. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely, it's hard to like set that line because you want to be involved with everything.
Yeah, I think one of the themes for today's episode is like how important it is to have your routines and to have your balance and to have your foundation to be able to manage yourself through all of this. Because if you don't, it can definitely lead to some suffering. So I've been, it's almost like calling me to get more solid on my routines and my structure and planning and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Gamma, I really love. I think the landing page looks really great, and we'll continue to develop it. But I have used it before in my coaching business, creating some of the coaching session PowerPoints, and I've really enjoyed using that. It can create so much out of maybe just an outline, or if you have more depth information, it can split it up in the best way that's digestible to the person that you're presenting to. So I really enjoy that service. Yeah, vibe coding is really difficult. I think I'll hop into like my personal journey and updates with that. The organization that I'm in, called Women Defining AI, they had a short beta module course. It was a 2-week long course. We met every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And basically it highlighted like the main core points of going from nothing to actually building an app that's out there. And so it was very high level, understanding like all the different parts of the process of creating an app. But I was trying to follow along as much as I can. And so, I downloaded this thing called Node.js, which I'll have to do more research on, but I believe it's like a code base where it's like a foundation for code. Do you know what Node.js is?
No, but it sounds kind of like a back end, like
Yeah,
the
yeah, I
back
think
end
it's a
of an
back
app.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I downloaded Cursor because that's what the person who was running the module course used, so I could follow along a little bit more closely. I started building a project, very basic, and I'm going to continue to develop it. But even just like downloading Node.js and downloading Cursor and getting it to run, and then getting GitHub available. And GitHub is where you can store your code and like save your code. Even just pushing, it's called pushing the code out to GitHub, was even challenging to do. So even if you like didn't have any like actual product, you just had kind of like a basic code, even just getting to that point where it's on GitHub is an accomplishment in itself. So very proud of that in myself. It's hard, but it's rewarding after you complete something like that.
It's making me realize how I think we should all, like all vibe coders new to all this stuff, we should probably take some high level courses on coding to understand terms and how. I just learned about the back end of a website,
Mm-hmm.
so
Exactly.
I think it'd be good for us to learn this stuff.
I agree. I've been using like ChatGPT as like my sounding board, kind of like my teacher along with it. The instructions for what we went over in the modules were very high level. And so she left out like the details in between. And so I had to go back into ChatGPT and ask it, okay, what do I do here? Like, what am I missing? And it'd say, here, do this code, or this is the issue here. So it really like helped me troubleshoot the process, which is really cool to like have that right there working with you. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, that's how Tanner was essentially vibe coding. Whenever there was an error, he would upload it to Claude Sonnet 3.7, which is known for being pretty good with code, and it would
Mm-hmm.
help him. So it's like using two different tools to build.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think like Cursor has like a chatbot installed in it already. So you can also use Cursor to make these changes too. But I think comparing them or using it with another LLM like Claude or ChatGPT, I think is a good way to solve the issues better.
Yeah, for sure.
I also learned how to publish on Vercel. So Vercel is a site where you can publish your code. So now it's out in the open if anyone wants to access it. There's nothing really there right now, so nothing to access, but it was cool to like learn the process of doing that. And then we also learned a little bit of how to add in payments. So Stripe is like a well-known like payment processing service that a lot of startup companies use, and then also how to install and add LLMs to your project. So yeah, that's something that I learned in the Women Defining AI module. My idea is to create a game to enhance human skills in this new world of AI. So I think everyone's kind of focusing on like the AI part of it and developing AI skills, but what does that mean for the human being? And I think it goes along with this podcast as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to continue to develop that.
On to AI market news and trends. Microsoft CEO said that they want every employee to be running a team of AI agents. I thought that was pretty crazy. I mean, it actually makes sense, you know? It's like, why wouldn't that be our future? That's the most efficient thing to do. And one of my business mentors, he runs a few businesses, and he told me directly, like, I'm excited for that. I haven't seen it yet, but like if you created that, I would be interested in purchasing that, just because obviously it's gonna boost your business in a lot of ways. Trump also signed the executive order, which I think, to me, it seems like it's kind of in response to what China just came out with, which was saying that they would start teaching AI in public schools down to age 6. So Trump's executive order essentially says that we're going to start teaching in kindergarten. I don't know what that means. Obviously, we're not going to hand them GPT, but like getting used to working with technology even earlier, which is crazy. I'm sure you have some thoughts on that. Good and concerning, like it has effect.
Yeah, exactly. As I mentioned in the last episode, I think with China having it as a requirement for children age 6 to learn AI, there's always an issue between, attachment to the AI and like actual learning and child development. So I do agree with like Trump kind of signing that executive order, like because China did it. But yeah, I really hope and would love to help out with, ensuring that it's implemented in the best possible way in schools, because it's going to change how humans interact with each other and how they develop. And it might expedite their learning processes. So they're probably going to be 100 times smarter than we are today. But, I think there's a counter argument to how are they going to be able to communicate with each other? Like, is that still going to be the same? So yeah, but it's interesting that Trump signed that.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big concerns is ethics. How do we integrate it ethically in a way that makes sense and doesn't actually hurt people while helping the economy? But one of the biggest opportunities is in that executive order. They're stating that they want to implement it in our entire country, which means more learning and education, more opportunities to get into those fields. Another thing I saw was that half of all Gen Z new college grads are saying that they see their new degree as pretty worthless because employers are now asking more questions about how good are you with AI? Can you work with AI, rather than asking about their degrees? So this was kind of a trend that I saw a few years ago with Gen Z. Gen Y was told by Gen X to go to college and get a good job because that's the American way. It's the best thing you can do with your life. In a lot of cases, that was the message. And so Gen Y did that and compiled mountains of debt, and we're kind of like, I don't know if that was the best thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Gen Z, I think, has been learning from that for years. I learned that Gen Z was more entrepreneurial, I think 6-8 years ago when I was working in corporate. And I really like that about them. I think it's smart of them to learn from us. And this is kind of a continuation of that. And I think colleges will probably be deemed less valuable, or they will probably have more degrees that incorporate AI or focus solely on AI, as a part of the reskilling our workforce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what Gen Z is feeling now is like, oh, I went into college for X, Y, and Z, say like supply chain, or I went into college for marketing and learned all these skills. And now that AI can do these things and automate these things, like, why did I even get that degree? They're feeling like it was a waste of time because those skills are obsolete now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially coding, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the big ones.
Yeah. I was talking to a family friend of mine the other day, and he's a little bit younger than me, and just asking him, like, what's his take on it. And basically, I think they used AI a little bit more as like Chegg, right? Like to help them out with their homework or to create essays without them even having to do it themselves. And I think that was an interesting take on it, right? Because I think like that's kind of what people see as it being used for right now. And it can be used in ways where you can develop your skills, but I think there's ways that it can deplete your skills by replacing it with just building essays for you or building things, in replacement of you using your own brain. But yeah, I think it has a really big impact on Gen Z right now, and think they're feeling pretty lost. So, some more news that came out: ChatGPT o3 and o4 mini models came out. And these are pretty big new models that came out. They're reasoning models. So they're like thinking about the answer that they want to give you, responding to your question. It's not just, okay, it's a statistical type of model where it's like the probability of the next word, how the other large language models were. These models are actually reasoning and thinking. So when we hear that AI models are getting better at reasoning, it means they're learning to think through things. They're not just repeating information back to you or just repeating, the information that comes from the statistic. And it gives really good information. It's very human like. And some people are even saying we can really feel the AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, meaning the models are thinking for themselves. I posted this on Instagram, but Sam Altman tweeted, "I think this is going to be more like the Renaissance than the Industrial Revolution." And I found this to be pretty big news because he's one of the leading figures in this movement, if not the leading figure in this AI movement. And I think that really changes the connotation of AI and this AI revolution to one from being kind of negative and fearful to one that's more positive and more artistic. I think the Industrial Revolution kind of has a negative ish connotation of like machines taking over jobs, while the Renaissance was more like artistic ability and creative freedom and new beginnings. And so I think that kind of changes the attitude of it.
Have you used the new GPT models and like experienced how annoying they kind of are?
Why do you think they're annoying?
I'm like, hey, what's the weather? And it's like, great question. Like, I just saw a thing. Actually, Sam, he made a tweet about that. He was like, I know our models are like really annoying. We tried to upgrade something, and that was the cause and effect. That it's like praising you like you're God for asking about the simplest things. I was even kind of chatting with it with my partner, trying to learn something that we were curious about, and we were both just like, chill, dude.
That's funny. Yeah. When I was debugging the vibe coding project that I was doing, it was saying, like, great question. You're almost there. Or like, keep it up. And I'm like, I just want to know the answer. I don't need to be praised constantly. When I figure it out, sure.
Yeah. I kept telling it to I was like, don't say oh before you respond. But it kept doing it. So yeah, they're working on it.
That's funny. Yeah, but I have tried the o3 model. I think I was debugging with the 4.0 model, so it wasn't like the new one. But I find it interesting to see the thinking abilities behind it. Like it actually explains like, okay, I'm thinking about this response. And it like tells you like what's going on in their brain technically. So yeah,
Their
it's pretty
technical brain.
yeah, so it's pretty neat. And then one last thing. So Google's DeepMind launched Dolphin Gemma, which is really cool. It allows you to communicate with dolphins. So basically how it works is they decode and they can generate dolphin whistles and clicks. So they can hear what dolphins are saying and decode it, and they can also create those sounds. And I feel like, pretty soon we'll be able to talk to our pets, our dogs and our cats that we have. So stay tuned for that.
Amazing. I would love to know what this cat is thinking. It's pretty obvious when I mess with her and she bites me, but I want to know the exact insults.
Right, exactly. What was the real reason? In this section, we will go into our deep dive discussion on how AI impacts mental health. So, the first one, we'll talk about AI therapy and emotional support. So, what does AI therapy and emotional support look like?
Yeah, so it's definitely evolving, of course. We're still very early in the stages of seeing what tools are coming out there, and even earlier in the journey of knowing the effects that they're having. But so far, AI is assisting with early diagnosis, personalized therapy, and support tools. There's quite a few tools out there that incorporate AI. I'll name off a few of them. Wysa, Wysa, is based deeply in cognitive behavioral therapy, and they also have therapists that you can go to. So I think that to me is a really good thing. And the theme of this episode is like balance. You don't want to just eliminate all humans and formal clinical therapy for these tools, but they can aid and they can help when you use them properly. Youper is another one, Youper, which is more just self-guided on your own with some helpful AI integrated tools. Woebot, I saw that one quite a while ago, and it was developed by clinical psychologists, and it seems a lot more clinical professional, and they do have studies on it already that it's proven to decrease anxiety and depression within 2 weeks. So it's having a positive impact. Replika is another one, Replika. It's more of an AI companion, emotional support and growth, which we'll kind of get into here soon about the effects of like leaning on AI too much as a friend. But yeah, I'm definitely a believer in using AI. I'm a pretty emotional person, and I'm very much into the deeper side of things, inner work and such, as I've mentioned in previous episodes. So yeah, I've used Claude and GBT, and I've kind of poured out my heart and soul a little bit, and it has not disappointed. You know, it meets you right there, just like when you're trying to learn how to fix an engine, or it can summarize a book for you and help you address your like inner healing that you're going through the lens of that author, which is amazing. I've mentioned I'm working on the Conscious Mental Wellness program, which integrates AI coaches and AI prompts for journaling, and also a men's mental health app that kind of does a similar thing. I think it really can help us fill a gap in our society within this mental health epidemic, because there are not enough therapists. Therapists are massively bottlenecked, and they have been for a while, because there's a lot more people who need help than who can afford it or who can overcome stigmas to speak up, especially for men. You know, I've mentioned that a bunch too. So the fact that I can create a product for free puts this thing on someone's work computer, especially for a man, and they can just say, I'm pissed or whatever. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, they can actually see value from speaking and like learning these principles on their own. That is like the work, you know? So I'm a believer, but as we'll see in this episode, it's all about balance. You know, there's actually negative effects if you lean on AI entirely or too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think all those apps are really awesome. Having that accessibility to these mental health support AI applications, I think, is a great way to access these things without putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation where you're going to a therapist, or, you know, maybe you're afraid to speak up, as you were mentioning. So I think like the accessibility of AI therapy is wonderful. I think it does come with a balance too, and we'll talk more about it. But I think like over reliance on it will be where we need to ensure that there's a line that needs to be drawn, or some policies put in place to ensure humans are still relating to each other, how humans relate to each other, and they're not just relying solely on these bots.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the difficult change as a society that we are going to have to go through, is like, what is the new norm? What is the correct balance of a real life therapist, an AI chatbot coach or therapist, and journaling and exercise and meditation? It's incredible that we can offer an app for $5 a month, or even for free. Like, you can use GPT. It's affordable and it's accessible anytime you need it for you to talk about your stuff, you know. And like Wednesday at 10 p.m. when I'm really feeling something from a friendship, or, you know, in relationship with anyone that I'm trying to understand, I can just pour out whatever I'm going through, you know. And it's confusing. Life is confusing, and this can help you put structure to that. So I think there's a lot of good in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. Okay, tell me more about the apps that you're creating around this.
Well, the corporate mental wellness app is pretty simple. It is a way to gamify journaling with the help of AI, and you connect it on the back end to OpenAI or whatever else you want to, that connects with some form of AI that brings in a new prompt daily. And then obviously you track that, and you can kind of reward your employees, or, you know, they can feel more accomplished themselves if they see if there's a streak. And then, you know, it's just like the benefit I talked about with talking with ChatGPT. Our AI coaches that we have different areas of focus, whether you're trying to really work through something internally, personally, or you're trying to grow professionally. Like, there's different focus areas for different people with different needs at different times, you know. So the same person can need a different area of focus at a different time. So to have all those available to them at any time where you can talk to someone and tell it either like the trigger you're feeling or the business you're trying to build or why you're unhappy, in your job, and your boss supports this, I think it's a win-win for everyone, because mental health is becoming more important than ever because so many people are suffering. It's a big problem. It's a silent epidemic. And then of course, we have modules so you can learn about stress management at work, or managing depressive thoughts, or learning about CBT or DBT, etc. So that's kind of like that whole package. And then the men's mental health app, I think, is really needed in our society, because men, as we know, struggle more to speak up than anyone because of stigmas that have historically said it's weak for you to feel emotion, to feel weak, and to need to speak up, to need to cry, etc. So to offer an app that does that with no judgment, and it's free or $5 a month for a man who can't overcome those stigmas to go see a therapist or can't afford a therapist, I think that's huge. I think that offers a lot of value. What I see in the men's groups that I run with the nonprofit Speak Your Mind, the biggest thing is how hard it is for adult males to make friends. I'm not saying that other people don't struggle with that. I think it's a common thing, but the stigmas, for me, in my experience, I see those playing a pretty significant role above anyone else I've seen. Offering a journaling and AI coach app just for men that also can maybe connect us like in your city to like go out and mountain bike or play pickleball or like even grab a beer. I think that could be a really good opportunity, and I'm excited to have the chance to create that for people.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I think it's really great that you're like helping support that community of men and helping build that support system. So good luck with that app. I think it'll create a huge impact
Thank
on
you.
society.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Yeah. Going a little bit further into AI therapy and emotional support, I think there's possibility where people can become more connected to the chatbot than they are connected to the human beings that are around them. So, when it's hard to turn or connect to humans, say like you have a disagreement with someone and you still want that connection, there might be possibility where people turn to the chatbots instead. So there could be, ways that it could divide humanity further. But again, as Mauro said, it will all come with balance, right? We need to ensure that there's a balance between using chatbots and using AI as emotional support versus actually connecting with your human beings that are around you.
It's all about balance, as it always was, and it always will be. So yeah, there's definitely some opportunities, challenges, ethical concerns. I think the biggest opportunities are increased accessibility for underserved, underrepresented populations. You can create an app that's pretty affordable, or a service or a business that caters to people who don't have enough money for therapy. And I think that that's the biggest opportunity we have. The challenges, risks, and ethical concerns are mostly with data privacy, and what you mentioned, which we'll also mention again in this episode, about actually reducing the most important thing for us, which is the depth and the love of human touch and connection. So it's kind of a slippery slope, like with social media. That is an addictive thing. And I think that there's a chance that connecting with a perfect, idealized version of a human being and a robot has the chance to be that as well. So that's definitely a big concern. We talked about biases before too. It's like AI is biased. We know that. It's clear. It is biased because it's trained on us and we are biased. So there's still a long way to go to create unbiased systems with AI and helping with mental health. And then of course, we talked about this as well, like the ethical guidelines and creating the actual framework to know what's best, because it's all so new. So far, we know it's balance.
Yes, facts.
Yeah, but the future outlook is strong. It's going to continue to change the landscape. It's going to continue to innovate our world, our humanity, and our mental health. So it's something we really need to spend some time on.
Definitely. So, with so much of communication right now filtered through technology, what does real human connection look like right now and in the future? So, for me, I already see people that I know using AI to create emails and to create resumes and even draft up texts that are a little bit difficult to send. And I think this is showing inauthenticity through the screen. If you're on the receiving end of these things, you can mostly tell when it's AI. If you are familiar with AI enough, you can tell when these texts or emails are created and drafted by AI. So, I think the more that we rely on this technology, the more that we're going to forget how to communicate in the real world. And I think it's going to lead us to become more lonely with heavier reliance on this technology.
Very interesting. I'm guilty of this within the past week, working through difficult emotions. And although I do agree that, and it is apparent that the more we lean on AI, almost like the less intelligent we get, it seems, because we're not using those muscles as much ourselves. And if you don't use it, you lose it. However, for me personally, there's two positives there. There's the positive of like de-escalating a situation and the positive of learning how to come off less harsh, more gentle, more loving, more empathetic. You can analyze how you're about to sound by sending the text that you want to send to GPT and say, hey, where can you see like some negativity or maybe judgment or gaslighting or whatever, like be real with me. It'll tell you. Like it told me, where I was kind of like trying to be emotionally open, but I was kind of like dumping a little bit where that actually could have been hurtful, So to me, that kind of saved me a little bit from escalating a situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right on the nail with that. I think it really comes down to how the user is going to use the chatbots in those instances, right? I think if they're just being lazy and they send ChatGPT, this is the message that I got. I don't know what to say. And ChatGPT creates it themselves, then, that's not them using their muscle. But I think if you're putting in maybe your message that you want feedback from ChatGPT on how to craft better to sound, more relatable, more empathetic, I think that's a good way to use it to get some insight into how you can improve the situation.
The other part of that is transparency. On Instagram and Facebook, they're wanting you to label already what you've created with AI so that you're not kind of deceptive. So I think that's where you could say, hey, this isn't entirely mine, I got help.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to be transparent and be honest with yourself and with everyone else out there. There's a creator that I follow named Sabrina Romanoff, I think, and she created like a deep fake of herself. So basically a replica of herself. And she highlighted that the deep fake had a purple hat. So if you saw a purple hat in her video, it wasn't her, it was her, AI image of her. So I think that's a really great way of being transparent about using AI and that, she's still using it, but she's using it in a way that's honest. And I think that really matters, right? Like I think the people who are dishonest about it and using it, I think that doesn't come over very well, but I think the people who are honest at using it, I think that has better receptiveness.
Yeah, it all comes back to human principles and how you use it.
Yeah, exactly. I'll go into a study that I saw. So, this is an MIT study. So, researchers studied how different types of chatbot conversations affected loneliness and emotional dependence. So, what they found was that at first, voice based chatbots seemed more helpful than text based chatbots in reducing loneliness. So, if you're talking to it over voice or if you're texting. So, voice based was more helpful than text based in reducing loneliness. However, this benefit disappeared with heavier use, and especially when the chatbot had a neutral or robotic tone. I found that really interesting because when you're talking to the chatbot in voice mode, the tone of the voice mattered in terms of reducing loneliness. So, yeah, I think that was a really interesting finding.
You sent me that study and I had GPT summarize it. And then I asked it to take this summary of this study and the results on humanity and create a picture that depicts that exactly, the outcome. And this picture is depressing. It's like dark and gray, like a gloomy room, and this girl sitting with bags under her eyes and earplugs going into her phone. This doesn't look like she's showered in a week. And just like the texture of her skin is like, there's darkness there. And she's holding up the phone, and the phone is this like picture of this chatbot smiling, and it says, "Hi, how are you?" So like if that's the effect, that's pretty concerning.
Yeah, I definitely found that picture to be concerning. I think it could be a potential in our future, right? I think if we're not safe with it right now, I think it's a possibility. Okay, so going further on this MIT study, they found that talking about personal topics slightly increased feelings of loneliness, but actually reduced emotional dependence on the AI. However, non personal topics like casual small talk led to a greater emotional dependence, especially for people who use the chatbot a lot. So I think, Mario, what you were saying about, talking to it with like personal topics, I think like you're using it to help you out with relationships in the real world, right? So it's reducing your emotional dependence on the AI. It's not exactly like you're using it as your support system, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know, like slightly increased feelings of loneliness. I don't know if that's what you're feeling
I'm
with
so
that.
lonely. I'm lonelier than ever. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a good point. That was my first question, is like, what is emotional dependence, And from how you kind of explained it, no, I don't think I'm depending on it to like relieve my emotions and help me feel better. I'm using it as a tool to learn how to work on my own stuff and let go of negative habits and negative self-talk and negative core beliefs.
Yeah, and so I think like with non-personal topics going to that, like say you're talking to ChatGPT just like a friend, right? And you go to them for things that, friends would talk about. So for people who are like using ChatGPT as a friend, I think they're kind of relying on it for greater emotional dependence, right? Like if you're using it as a friend, it's going to become a friend to you. And what friends do is they're there for each other and they emotionally support each other. So, yeah, I think it's interesting to see that talking to it about personal topics helps you more in the real world with emotional stuff, while non personal topics kind of does the opposite.
Honestly, it's really helpful to kind of use me as a case study because I'm using it for these things, but I don't use it as a friend. I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" Kind of like just being silly. Like, "Where are you at? What are you up to? What are you doing? How you been?" Gives me a non-human answer like, "I'm great. How are you? What can I help you with?" But I can see how if you need a friend and you don't have any friends and you're sad and you're struggling and you pick up your GPT at any time that you need all day, every day, I can see how that would create dependency. So it's really good to like establish between the two and make sure that I continue to use it in a healthy way.
Yeah, so overall, more frequent use of AI chatbots, regardless of voice or topic, was linked to higher loneliness, more emotional dependence, and less real world socializing. And this is where the picture that we just shared kind of comes into play of what, the world could come to if we continue down this path. People who already, had a strong tendency to form emotional attachments or who trust chatbots a lot were especially likely to feel lonely and dependent afterwards.
Yeah, that's another really important thing that just came to me is like different types of people. We need to treat different types of people with different tendencies. We need to be mindful of that with this. Like for example, teenage girls are more susceptible to addiction to social media. And we've actually seen an increase in suicide rate among teen girls outpacing teen boys, which in general, 80% of all suicides are men. So just being aware of these different sects of society and how we might want to introduce AI differently to each one, I think could be really important in the future.
Yeah, I think like what I've learned is that AI can be a mirror of you. And so if you're maybe a little bit insecure or emotionally dependent on people, look for validation outside of you. I think it can drastically enhance that effect and that could lead to more serious issues. So, yeah, I think we need to look at it different groups, different types of people who have different mentalities. How do we best use AI in these different ways? And like, how do we not use them in certain
Yeah,
ways?
absolutely.
Okay, so Moving on to digital dependence and cognitive offloading. So, what happens to our human minds if we offload everything to AI? So, we were kind of talking about this before, but I think there's a huge issue of like kind of having AI do everything for you, having them do the tasks for you, like write your own papers or write your own social media posts or just doing anything for you and not like working alongside with it as a collaborator. There's a study that there is a significant negative correlation between frequent AI usage and critical thinking abilities. This study was by Michael Gerlich at SBS Swiss Business School, a survey by Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon University. Younger participants age 17 to 25 exhibited higher dependence on AI tools and lower critical thinking scores compared to older participants. Going back to Gen Z, as we were talking about before, like Gen Z using AI to do their homework for them or to do things for them in college so that they can pass that class. They're not critically thinking and enhancing those abilities. It's basically removing those abilities and not using that muscle, as you were saying before. So I think that's a big issue of like being dependent on AI and, offloading all your brain power to it.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's like based on age or the type of person or what you're in, like maybe we recommend using it less for younger people based on that study. I had to go and get a few degrees and do a lot of critical thinking. Now that I'm 34, maybe it's not as damaging, or I shouldn't really need as much caution as like a 6-year-old, or a 10-year-old. I'm kind of like juxtaposed here about this because Dan Sullivan is an entrepreneurial coach, and one of his books is 10x is easier than 2x. And another one is Who Not How. And he talks all about focusing on the 20% of tasks that make the biggest difference for you, elevate you, your organization, whatever you're working on. And you want to delegate the rest, the 80%. So like in a way, I personally want to delegate a lot of tasks, especially the mundane, repetitive ones, but I want to keep the high level strategy, the vision, the critical thinking, the big decisions. Like I need to stay with those. So it just speaks to like, yeah, we're still figuring this out. What we should delegate and use AI for and what we shouldn't. What's the best balance?
There's a creator that I follow named ChatGPT talking about digital dependence and cognitive offloading. She basically said it's not the AI's fault to blame that these 17 to 25-year-olds are using AI to do their work. It's social media's fault. And this is because algorithms are meant to keep you hooked and mess with your dopamine and have proven to reduce our attention spans. So kids can't really even think properly to complete these certain tasks because their brains are now wired for short-term rewards and can't think about long-term things and actually, be able to do harder, longer tasks. So I think social media definitely does partake in that. Another question with AI and mental health is, could the rise of AI companions reduce loneliness or further detach us from real relationships? So I think it's a two-way street. So for one, I think elderly folks, socially anxious people, people that really have a difficult time to get out there and meet new friends, I think it could really help them find a sense of connection with an AI companion. Not even just like a chatbot, but like maybe in the future, like a robot that's in the house helping you out with things, being your companion. For others who can create relationships and really take those risks, younger generation, people who, are a little afraid, but they can do things, I think it's really dangerous for them. I think it's taking the easy way out and not putting your effort into creating lasting, meaningful relationships. So I think AI companions could reduce loneliness in some ways, but also further detach us in other ways. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's about value, with anything. It's like humans seek value. And if an AI bot perceivedly provides more value than a human being, I think that is kind of what gives us our answer about the potential of like where things could go. It's like companies are replacing humans with AI. So why wouldn't humans replace other humans in relationship with AI if they're offering value? or they think they're offering value, but they're actually worse for them, like social media. Yeah, there's a lot there, so it's to be determined.
Another question with AI and mental health is, what kind of emotional and ethical weight are the people who are designing and building AI carrying? And how is it affecting them? So, with people who are actually building AI, like people in OpenAI, Anthropic, I think people in these roles are working like crazy because it's a race to get to the top first. This AI boom is happening now. And just like the US is rivaling China, it's all these different AI companies who are rivaling each other to get the most market share because it's a new market. Continuing that, the more that AI agents are utilized, the more security concerns there are. So there can be hackers, there can be people who try to get into these systems. And the more that agents are able to do things for you and kind of find their way into something, I think the more that it's going to be necessary to have the correct security with these systems. And that leads to the people who are working on these security systems to be completely overworked.
I definitely can feel that. Like, being that I am motivated to stay up to date on this stuff for this podcast and for my own benefit of my life and like projects I'm working on, it's a lot. Like, it's overwhelming, And kind of like I said earlier, it's like I feel like I can never do enough to stay up to date on all the changes and all the tools that are coming out that I can use, It takes a lot of energy just to ground myself and to constantly decipher and discern and prioritize my focus and my energy. And just like social media, it's like I'm kind of more ADD than ever, I'm working on several projects right now because I can, or because I want to, because there's so many options, and like that is statistically not good for your mental health. It's not good for you to do 8 things at once. There's no such thing as multitasking. Studies have shown that time and time again. You can physically do 2 or 3 things at once, but your energy is split, and the back and forth of your attention from left to right, up and down, and between all these things has a negative impact on us. So it's a lot. It's overwhelming, I'll be honest. But it's also like incredible at the same time.
Yeah, again, I think there's a balance. It's like, okay, how can I maybe take the top 3 projects or the top 20%, as you were saying before, like what's the most important and how can I focus my energy on that? But with this AI boom that's happening, like we want to stay super up to date with all these trends that are happening and all these new innovations that are coming out. And it's so hard to like maintain that balance because you want to learn so much, especially with a mindset of learning and growing. It's hard to like know when to stop and know when to pull back and just be.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think it's so valid that you feel that way. I definitely feel that way, and I'm sure a lot of other people are feeling that way with this AI boom.
absolutely. I mean, imagine if you saw it as just a complete detriment to our society. We see it as an opportunity.
Right.
If you're already just completely fearful or you've already lost your job, like, and you just see it taking over more and more, and there's so much coming at you, that's tough. It's tough to cope with. So, coping skills, managing our time, pursuing balance, those are all more important than ever.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think another effect of people who are working on AI is like safety teams. So in OpenAI, there's some people who have like left the safety teams because they're not exactly focusing on the safety of the large language model and what's going on behind the wall in the brain of the AI model. So it's concerning because there's not a lot of control on like what this model is actually doing and what's happening behind those walls. And that's pretty scary to talk about and like scary to think about. Is like, okay, we're talking to these bots, we're giving them a lot of information. The people that are in the company might not even know what's going on behind it. And that's concerning.
Very.
Yeah. But yeah, I think like what I try to focus on and like what I want to share with this podcast is like, let's try to look at AI as an opportunity and not something that's frightening. Action and growth comes from doing something despite fear. And I think that's so important with anything in this life, and that'll be so important with AI. Is maybe you're afraid to use it, but you will grow exponentially if you try to learn it despite your fear that you have. of it.
Amen.
Last question that we'll talk about is, if AI can mimic empathy and emotions, what does that mean for the future of real human emotional intelligence? In my opinion, I think it could really change the whole landscape of human interaction. Right now, it's not really affecting it that much, but with our continued dependence on a chatbot, it can definitely change the way that we interact people emotionally. I think about this a little bit differently with the 5 love languages. I kind of feel like the love languages will transition because with chatbots, right? Words of affirmation is a love language, but I could see it kind of transitioning to not be a love language anymore because of how we utilize language in AI. And I think it will kind of eliminate the impactfulness of words and kind of focus more on like the physical side of things and acts of service and like what's actually physical in the real world versus, what's spoken aloud. So I don't know.
Whoa. It's an interesting one.
But yeah, I think like emotional intelligence, again, I think it depends on how you're using AI, right? If you're using it to really understand the people around you and work through your issues that you have, I think you're learning more about EQ and you're growing your EQ. But if you're telling it to do X, Y, and Z and respond X, Y, and Z to this situation, you're kind of just passing it off to that chatbot and not really enhancing those skills that you have.
Yeah, I think that, there's kind of a recurring theme of like, it's all about how you use it. So if you just copy and paste and tell it to like modify your stuff and then send it back to whoever, whether it's a task or a message that's like emotionally weighted, you're gonna not be as good at handling those situations yourself in the future. Like if you don't use it, you lose it. But if you use it as a tool to elevate your emotional intelligence and related to the whole reskilling and upskilling, I think that's where the opportunity is. It's like emotional intelligence is more important than ever because chatbots don't really have much of it at all yet. So yeah, the main theme of today is really to stay up to date on all this stuff. Learn about how AI is affecting society, your psychology, the economy, your mental health or collective mental health, but with balance. Like it's all about balance, just like life is in general. This is just another thing that's come along that's caused some change at a pretty fast rate, but it's all about balancing your own habits, pursuing your own mental health, getting exercise, meditating, getting out into nature, taking breaks, setting boundaries is another thing. I learned a lot about addiction in the past couple months as it relates to social media. And I took a 30-day break from scrolling because I could tell that I was like addicted to it, So boundaries are an important way for us to maintain our habits. If you don't have any rules or structure or boundaries, like you could definitely suffer with this stuff because there's so much coming at us and so much change. So definitely focus on your boundaries and seeking balance with other humans, like don't just go in a room and not talk to anyone, even if it's hard. It will be hard to get outside sometimes and reach out to people when you're struggling. Don't just lean on GBT. Call your friends, family, coworkers, go play pickleball with someone you don't know. These are all important foundational things that are integral to our mental health.
Yeah, to add on what Mario said, I think it's really important to step outside of yourself for a moment and really look at the whole situation at hand. Look at the relationships that you have with these tools and ask yourself, are they healthy? Am I learning anything? Am I losing anything? I think it'll be really important to ask yourself those questions, to really be mindful of how you use them and how you're balancing them. And if there are answers that you don't exactly like with that, set those boundaries and set limits of how you can use it and when you can use it. Yeah, and stay educated. Continue to learn about these things because it's continuing to change and it's the future.
The future is now. Seize the moment, but within balance, and also go meditate outside. Okay, a little teaser into the next episode. Episode 4, we'll be talking about AI and entrepreneurship. We will have one of my business mentors and friend, Kenneth Lowe. He is the founder of Zen Biz, which is an AI consulting company. He's based in California, so we're excited to have him on and gain some insight into what he's been up to and his take on AI where we've been, where we are, and where we're going, and of course, how you can benefit if you are an entrepreneur.
Awesome. Yeah. Hope you guys like this episode. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and join us online to share your thoughts. We are Beyond Evolution on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. You can listen on a range of different platforms from Spotify to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and Substack.
Yeah, give us a follow, positive review, share this with your friends. Reach out to us too. You know, we love connecting with people in the community and hearing what you think and what you want to hear, what we can address to help you cope with all the changes.
Thanks so much for joining us here. We always like to end our podcast by reminding you that while this world of AI and what it means for humanity beyond evolution can be exciting yet uncertain, it's a journey of growth. So keep learning, keep evolving, and allow yourself to just be.